Great, thank you so much, Greg. Hey everyone, thanks so much for joining. Super excited to welcome Adam here to join us here today. Our first Fireside Chat and Leadership Talk of 2025. And we're excited to do many, many more, but today will be a good one here. So I'm gonna give a brief intro to Adam, and then we're gonna do a kind of talk, and then hopefully open up the Q&A at the end. You know, we want this to be interactive and learning. These talks, I think, I've heard and found from past fellows them be so important to better get context on the industry, how to pursue a career, how to think about life. And so that's why I'm excited to welcome Adam here. So Adam currently is the founder and CEO of Domain Money, but he's been a serial entrepreneur throughout his career. He's founded multiple startups. The last one, which was Clarity Money, which was acquired by Goldman Sachs. He had was a partner at Goldman Sachs after that acquisition and built many of their products like Marcus Invest, Marcus Checking, which I've used actually Marcus in the past. And then before that, founded startups such as Message One and Buzzsaw, just to name a couple of theirs. So a lot of breadth of experience around both how the technology landscape has evolved, what it means to be a leader there, how to think about one's career. And I know Adam's both passionate about not just technology, also impact, being involved in different kinds of organizations, about entrepreneurship, about creating opportunity. And he's also given talks at various business schools and other places around how to think about your career and building a meaningful life. So I'm excited for him to join us here to talk a little about that here today. So let's give Adam a warm welcome.
So thanks so much for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today. What I thought I'd do is spend a few minutes talking about one of the classes that I give. I taught at the business school at Columbia and the law school at University of Texas. And I do a whole section on finding a meaningful life. And so rather than bore you with some slides, I thought I'd sort of just talk you through some of the ideas that I touch on during that lecture. At the core of finding a meaningful life, to me, it's about figuring out what you're good at and running as fast toward that as you can. And that requires a level of intellectual honesty that is sometimes hard to come by, because we all want to believe that we can do lots of different things. There's a whole bunch of stuff I suck at, and I'm really intent on ensuring that the things I spend my time on in the course of a day leverage the things I'm best at, and I find ways to compensate for the things I'm not great at. And so one of the ways you do that is you sort of figure out what are the things that you really enjoy doing, because people tend to enjoy doing the things they're good at. If you're a puzzle solver, if you're a problem solver, if you're analytical, if you enjoy the solitude of research, then you're probably better suited for some kind of job associated with pouring through lots of data, analyzing information, trying to figure out a problem. If you're more social and you tend to enjoy the company of others more, you're probably better suited for a job in management or in sales or marketing or PR, something that sort of leverages your natural strengths and proclivities. And so while that may seem relatively simple, if you really dive into that, what you'll find is a matrix for how to attack the problem of getting a job, right? Which is kind of what we're all here to achieve. And one of the things that I have found in my hiring, so I've probably hired, I don't know, like a lot of people.
Hundreds, dozens,
it's
thousands,
more like in the thousands.
In the thousands, yeah.
And I've developed a quick sort of sense that has sort of emerged over time to figure out who's likely to be a good employee and who's likely not to be a good employee. And there's a couple of things that I look for, and I thought I'd share them with you because I think it might help you think about how to tackle finding a job. The first is a tight alignment between the job requirements and the capabilities of the individual, right? Now that's kind of just table stakes. Pretty much any job out there, there's probably many, many, many more applicants than there are job slots. And most of those applicants can do the job, right? They have the requisite skills to be able to achieve the function of the job. To set yourself apart from all of the other applicants, you really want to bring to the table something more than just the requisite skills. One is you want to show that you're a self-starter, right? That you are not waiting for somebody to give you permission to do something, but you yourself will pursue an activity, an objective, a puzzle, an idea, a thread of a thought on your own. And probably the biggest thing I can tell you, and the thing I hope you most remember from this talk, is what I'm about to say, which is if you can develop a muscle, just like working out requires the development of muscle, just like developing good habits requires the pattern of keeping up with it, if you can develop the muscle of becoming a self-starter, you are unstoppable. And I don't mean just in terms of finding a job, I mean in your whole life. Now, what does that mean? That means that you establish a set of behaviors that allow you to tackle things on your own without being given permission, without having to ask someone for help. Now, there's nothing wrong with asking for help, but if you can tackle things on your own, that to me stands out incredibly on a resume. And you can almost see it when you talk with a person because they bring to the table a mentality that, hey, I'm going to go do this. I'm going to go figure this out. And I want to give you a practical example of how you can employ this in your lives. So raise your hand if you're interested in AI. Keep your hand raised if you're interested in AI as it relates to replacing employees. Keep your hand raised if you're interested in the impact that might have to salaries. Okay, so this is a topic, right? We just sort of built a little idea around a topic. All of you right now possess the skills necessary to go become an absolute expert on that topic. Why? Because we live in an incredible age where access to information, access to tools are so readily available to pretty much anyone. And especially you fortunate folks who are in this room who have, one, taken the self-starter step of putting yourself in this room, actively engaged in the activity of trying to find your career path. You're already ahead of the game, right? But if you take that one step further and you take ownership of, you know what, I'm going to become an expert in the impact of AI on cybersecurity, the impact of AI on neighborhood monitoring, the impact of social media on child development. It doesn't matter what the topic is. And it doesn't matter if that topic isn't ultimately the job you land. But the development of that muscle of figuring out how to get good at understanding a topic is incredibly powerful. And so I would encourage all of you to develop that muscle. And that muscle can be about anything. It can be about building muscles. It can be about exercise. It can be about health. It can be about travel. It can be about anything. But establishing a framework in your own mind about how to go do that is just an incredible superpower. Now let's talk a little bit about that framework. You make a list of all the things that are part of that topic. Let's say it's child development and social media. Well, you could spend a month reading the top articles on social media's impact on child development, or you could use an AI tool that's on any computer available to you and get a summary of it. And then what you'll see, if you use the right AI tool, Perplexity AI is a pretty good one, is you'll see the source material from which those summaries are drawn. And then read those articles. And what will happen after a couple of days is you'll start to recognize, oh, I remember that article. That was referenced in that other piece. And I remember that researcher. They mentioned a statistic in that other article I read. And you'll start to, in your mind, feel like you're getting a sense of what the topic's range is. And when you do that, and you feel like you understand it, a little light bulb will go off in your head. And you'll feel like, okay, I'm starting to develop my muscle. And that's sort of the first step. And then you do that over and over and over and over again. And I remember when I was in law school, I sort of figured this out. Because what happens when you're in law school, this is a long answer to your question. I figured this out in law school is you read a case, and in law school it'll reference other cases. So you'll read a case and then it'll reference other cases. You're like, in Jones versus Johnson, they decided this. And in Albertsons versus whatever, they decided this. And these little individual nodes of information sort of form a cluster of ideas. And you get to a point where you start reading case law and you're like, oh, I know what they're about to say. They're going to start talking about that Jones versus Johnson case or the Albertson case. And you sort of feel like, okay, I sort of understand this. And that's the muscle I want you guys to develop. The self-starter muscle of becoming an expert in a field. And God, what an incredible time to be alive, because like I said, those tools and resources are available to you right now on the internet, on your phone. And so start small, start with something you feel like you have some natural proclivity toward, and then develop that muscle. What was your question?
Thanks for sharing that, Adam. I thought that was great.
Sorry.
We're going to get to AI in a moment, how we can all become experts. I totally agree with you around this spirit of learning. And you're right, everyone here is a self-starter, right? Taking the opportunity to join pursuit, to keep pursuing it, et cetera. But, and I want to go back a little bit later also both on AI and the hiring question, because you've seen so many people, but can you share a little bit more about your background? I gave a little bit of the bio, but what did you want to do before, we see where you are now, but can you share a little bit how you got here? How did you decide to start these companies? How did you find out what you were good at? What does it mean? And how do we think about that over time?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I had a very fortunate childhood. I had two professional parents. My father was an orthodontist. My mother was a stockbroker. They afforded me the opportunity to go to school and enabled me to go to college. And I went to law school, as I mentioned. And I, to be honest, probably didn't appreciate how fortunate I was at the time because I didn't really think much about my career until I was in law school. I didn't want to go to medical school. I really enjoyed school, philosophy, economics, history. That was all very interesting to me. And law school seemed like a logical sort of extension of that. And so I didn't really think hard about what I wanted to do until I was really a second-year law student. And I went to go visit a lawyer because my parents said, you need to get a job, so go talk to some people who can get you a job. And I remember going into this law firm's office and I interviewed with this lawyer and his shoes were all messed up. They were all scuffed up and then I went to go see this venture capitalist who a friend of mine knew, and his shoes were perfect. And I thought, this startup thing is probably more my speed. I kind of like the idea of startup land. But all joking aside, I always loved the idea of starting things. And I started some stuff when I was in high school. I started a newsletter and I had a little business when I was in high school. But I always liked the idea of starting things, and I always liked technology. And so I was naturally drawn to that when I started to really bring into focus what it is I wanted to do. And what I thought I wanted to do was venture capital. And I did that for about 20 years. Invested in lots of different startups. I would meet with entrepreneurs. They'd come in, they'd tell me their story. I'd decide to give them money or decide not to give them money. And that all went pretty well. And I enjoyed my career as a venture capitalist. I got the opportunity to back some really incredible entrepreneurs. We backed a company called Open Table, which turned out pretty well, and had a good career as a VC. But it took me a long time, almost 20 years, to figure out that what I really like is starting stuff, is blank sheet of paper, big idea, finding some people, finding some money, and sort of sketching out a vision for how to disrupt some big industry. And to me, that's an incredibly fun, challenging puzzle. And so I've started 5 companies now along the course of my journey, and they all pretty much have a similar theme, which is I tend to stumble upon an idea or a problem that I see in the world, and I think that there's some technology or some approach that can fix it. And when one of those ideas becomes obsessive for me and it makes it hard for me to sleep, the pattern recognition goes off in my mind that, okay, well, this is maybe something very, very real. And so one of the companies I started was a backup email company. This was a long time ago, before email was so ubiquitous and so reliable, but in the early days of the internet, email was pretty unreliable and the system would break a lot. And corporations used email a lot, and it was mission critical, but it wasn't as reliable as most mission critical systems are required to be. So we built a backup email system that grew to about 45 million in revenue. We ended up selling that business. That all worked out pretty well. I was a longtime customer of Mint. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of Mint. It's a tool to manage your money.
Personal finance.
And I hated Mint because it was this clunky old app that was basically a dashboard about your past. And what I wanted was a button to press to change something about your future. And so I started a company called Clarity Money, and Clarity Money was a competitor to Mint, but we enabled you to take action. So you sort of, connected all of your accounts to this app that we built, and we would discover all of your subscriptions. And you could press a button and it would cancel it. You could press a button and we'd give you your credit score. You could press a button and we could help you open up a savings account. You could press a button and we could help you find a better rate on your loans. And that worked pretty well. We grew to about 1 million customers in about a year, and Goldman Sachs bought it, and that took me down the Goldman Sachs journey that you mentioned. I'm just drawn to solving stuff. I was fortunate enough to, I made a little bit of money, and I bought a house. And there was a garden on the property, and I wanted to have a garden on it, but I'm not really the gardening type. But I was sort of fascinated by the idea of supply and demand. And so I put an ad on Craigslist, and I'm like, I have some land. If you want a garden, you can borrow my land, and we can kind of come up with a sharing arrangement. And it worked. And that led me to start a nonprofit, which I don't know if I've talked to you much about.
You mentioned it briefly around this one.
So I started a company called Shared Earth, which is a nonprofit that connects people who have land with people who want a garden. And it's a very simple, basically dating site for landowners and gardeners. And it's grown now to about 20,000 members. And it's very simple. It's just a utility to help people find land if they want a garden. There's a problem, and this is, again, another example of sort of the path of inquiry for me, is I sort of find a problem and I sort of am curious, well, what could technology do to solve that? And so when I posted that thing on Craigslist and I got all these responses, I'm like, seems like there are a lot of people who want a garden. So I started doing all this research, and there are community gardens all over the country. And all of them have waiting lists, often years long. So what does that tell you? There's way more gardeners than there are plots of available land. And it struck me, well, maybe there's lots of other people who have backyards that aren't actively gardening, who might be willing to share their land with a neighbor or a friend or somebody who lives in an apartment who doesn't have access to land. And so we built this thing called Shared Earth, and it kind of took off. And so those are the kinds of things I am drawn to.
So thanks for sharing that. I mean, I think, I'm sure there's lots of questions people may have about each of those experiences. How did you think about going back to what you're good at and discovering that, and maybe what you're not good at? Some things can be so abstract, I know we talk about what it means to be a VC or venture capitalist, but I think it can be very abstract for people. Wow, you're investing in people and companies from an idea. What does that mean? And then just starting all these various kind of things. How did you go from one to the other, and how did you confront, like, these are all the successes, but like, how do you know what you're really good at there or versus
I'm not going to tell you about all the failures. There's a whole bunch of those. I mean, my path has not been a straight line, and there's no shortage of wipeouts along the way, particularly in venture capital and startups. Most startups fail. Most venture capitalists don't make money, which is actually something most people don't realize.
Yeah.
Only a few venture capitalists make all the money. And so, I guess to bring things into more concrete terms, at a fundamental level, venture capitalists go out to large institutional investors, endowments, foundations, and say, hey, give me some money, and I'm going to dole out that money to different entrepreneurs who have different ideas. And the hope is that some small percentage of those ideas work out, and those ones that do work out so well that it sort of makes up for all the ones that don't work out. And so it's really a math equation of spreading your risk across a bunch of different bets and hoping that a few of those bets pay out and pay out so well that it, again, makes up for all the ones that don't. That's fundamentally what venture capital is. And the thing that you have to be really good at being a VC is, one, sort of seeing where the road is going, which I'm pretty good at, but I'm not great at. And the other thing you have to be really good at is identifying a really great entrepreneur. A really great entrepreneur is really hard to find, but he or she will reveal themselves pretty early in their lives because they possess a set of experiences that just suggest they're a self-starter, they are completely internally motivated, they have this sort of drive in them that's unstoppable. When you meet, if you were to have met Steve Jobs or Mark Zuckerberg or Bill Gates or Michael Dell at 19 years old, you would have said, that individual is going to do something profound. Because they just have this unstoppable curiosity, energy, intensity, focus, passion for whatever it is that they're doing. And, it's pretty darn easy to spot. And so, as a VC, it's actually kind of an easy job, but it's also the hardest job in the world because finding someone like that is super competitive and very, very rare. On the entrepreneur side, to go to that side of the equation, great entrepreneurs, as I mentioned, are really, really rare. I would say I'm an okay entrepreneur. I've had a pretty good career. I don't put myself in the category of Steve Jobs or Bill Gates or any of those guys, or even my brother. They're in a class of themselves. And what you're looking for, and as you guys think about potentially joining companies, you're sort of betting on an individual. Can this person build something really incredible? And even if it's a medium-sized or a large company, you're really betting on this individual to be able to pull it off. And so, what I would think about in practical terms with respect to you guys, particularly as you try to position yourselves as young engineers who are joining a workforce, who are part of a company, does this company have what it takes to make it? Does this CEO have what it takes to make it? Does she possess intensity, passion, curiosity, drive, commitment to make this thing work? And is the thing we're trying to do a big enough problem? And is our solution good enough that we can sort of justify our existence in the world? Because startups are just darn hard. I mean, they are darn hard. I say this with no humility at all. I'm in the middle of a startup now. It's my 5th one. I'm working my ass off to see if I can make it get there, right? And there's no guarantees it does. And part of what I love about all of that is that journey of going through the puzzle solving
ups and downs and problem
solving. Can you make it work?
Great, thanks.
I don't think I answered your question. I'm pretty sure I did.
It's helpful context for everyone. But so how does this tie back to meaning? You've talked about different learnings, different kinds of careers, and being very modest about the successes for both VC and also various companies and how you got here. But how does this work, or these different kinds of things tie back to that?
Yeah, I mean, the most meaningful things that I've done in my career are things that have impacted the lives of the people who I'm involved with. So, when we sell a company and, there's a liquidity event, the employees all share in the rewards of that. And, to get to sit down with each employee and tell them what they're going to get because of some acquisition is really just an incredibly rewarding thing. People are able to pay off student loans, they're able to pay off their mortgage, they're able to help their mom, they're able to, just be more financially secure. That is an incredibly rewarding thing. The other thing that I really have enjoyed is I taught for a long time. So I taught, as I mentioned, at Columbia for 10 years, and I taught the law school at UT in Austin for 5 years. And just helping people along their journey and figuring out this puzzle of what the hell am I going to do with my professional life is a very rewarding thing for me. So I really enjoy helping people discover their path. To me, that's very meaningful. And I'm involved on Dell, which is an organization that does software training for people in Nigeria. They have a few other countries in Africa where they operate, but they basically have a similar model where they help train folks and then help them get a job in software engineering. I was involved with a company with a nonprofit called Endeavor, which sort of helps entrepreneurs in developing countries, sort of showering them with resources and basically mentors to help these young companies along. So I really enjoy that. I think that's an important thing to do. I've been very fortunate in my life, and to be able to give back in that way is helpful.
Great, thanks for sharing that. And going back to, I guess, just thinking about what you've seen in your career, you've invested in many entrepreneurs, so many people, identifying people, hired thousands of people probably over the course of kind of career. And it's interesting, you're talking about the qualities that you're looking for, like self-starting is one of them. I think oftentimes we have this debate here, we're thinking about pursuit, what we're trying to teach and mold. Obviously software, teaching how to code is so important, but you seem to be speaking about what stands out, right? And these other qualities.
Yep.
Can you speak a little bit more around that? Like, how do you think about, what advice do you have on demonstrating to an employer on the job around these qualities and how that, because that might not come across on a resume, like you're saying, right?
So that's a great question because I have an answer for it. So I started with, having the requisite skills is the sort of first requirement, right? So you're not likely to get an interview unless you have the requisite skills. And there will be many candidates who have the requisite skills. And so the question is really at the heart of your question, how do you distinguish yourself from the pack? What do you do to stand out? And I go back to this idea of being a self-starter. So if I have a candidate who comes in and he or she puts their resume down and says, I went to this high school and I went to this college and I work here and, I want this job. That's a very different conversation than somebody who comes in and sits down and says, I'm really fascinated by what you guys are doing at your company. I was doing some research and I noticed there's 3 other companies that are doing similar things, and I'm curious what is different about what you guys are doing versus what the other guys are doing and why you think you're going to win. And the other thing I noticed when I was doing my research is that there's a few other upstarts out there who are also trying to tackle the problem in a different way. There's a new technology out there called AI, and it enables people to do things more efficiently. And what impact will that have on your business? And I was thinking about maybe as we think about how to develop software at scale to solve this problem, we could tackle the problem in this way. Just that shtick, and it's not a shtick, it really needs to be genuine, where you've done the research and you've sort of shown that you're interested in the problem set that they're tackling, is a huge differentiator. Never go into a resume waiting for them to just ask you questions and just respond. Obviously, let them ask you questions and obviously respond, but bring to the table more than that. It gets back to that self-starter thing. This isn't just another interview I'm taking. I really thought about your company. I really understood who the competitors are. I really understood what the competitive set is, what the competitive technologies are out there. And even if you're wrong, because you don't have nearly as much information as people who work inside the company. It just makes you stand out as somebody who actually is thinking about this and actually cares. And I can't tell you how many people I've interviewed who I'm like, this dude just doesn't care. Like, they're just here because they need a job. I don't want to hire somebody who needs a job. I want to hire somebody who wants a job. And there's a big difference.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think, that's, I see that also at Pursuit. That's a part of what we're looking for in selecting our fellows, what we hear from employers as well. So, but it's the simplest thing, but maybe the hardest to demonstrate, sometimes, but it should be easy to demonstrate too. Why do people demonstrate that or not, have you seen,
Well, I mean, I think people are intimidated. People are afraid. They don't want to say something wrong, so they sort of limit their answers to questions they've been asked. But, if you can come into an interview with a point of view, even if that point of view is wrong in some ways, it just presents you in a light of someone who is intellectually curious and a self-starter. And again, you're not going to get in the room unless you have the requisite required skills, right? So let's assume there are 30 applicants for a job. All the ones that get an interview, they have the requisite skills. Now the question is, how do you distinguish yourself? You distinguish yourself by not just being a resume, but by being somebody who has shown thought and interest and curiosity, and again, being a self-starter around something related to that business. And that's just a whole different conversation.
Makes sense. We're going to open up for Q&A right after this, but I wanted to circle back to a little bit how you started, and we're talking about AI initially. You spoke about like different parts of your career, starting a email backup company, right? So it seems like you've seen different waves of technology, or like email, web, mobile, however you want to define it, right? I guess any thoughts to share about where this moment, what AI means? How does this change jobs? Should we be thinking about how does this compare to what you've seen in your career about, if you're starting a career, what you would do?
Well, I mean, I think the most tangible thing that's relevant to you fine folks is that software engineering is fundamentally changing, especially at the sort of entry-level engineering role because of AI. You can, with AI, take a relatively early in their career software engineer and make them way more productive. And that's a huge shift, because what it means is that you don't have to be 5 years of Java experience to be able to produce at a 5-year Java developer level engineer. And so that opens up the universe of people who could be hired enormously, which is both a blessing and a curse for you guys, right? Because it means that more people can apply for those kinds of jobs and more people can do them. What I would encourage you to do as you develop your own software skills is to think of AI as like a second brain that you should rely on and utilize often in your learning process and in your coding process. In other words, think of it as an ever-present tutor and helper and cheat code to get components built. And it's really good at that, especially low-level code functions. And so I would make AI your best friend as it relates to how you code and learning how to code, because it will make you faster and better way more quickly than the traditional path of software development, becoming a software engineer. The other thing I would say is that, I have senior engineers who work at my current company, and if any one of them were to go away for, call it 3 to 6 months, just sit on a beach somewhere, when they come back, they're not irrelevant, but they're like way behind. Because software just, it's like it moves and it's fast. And so you have to be someone who is able and willing to constantly learn new things. And everything I said about being a self-starter and developing the muscle to learn new things and showing initiative around that, that is like doubly so the case for software engineers. You know, I have had engineers who 46, 47, 48, and they've had really good careers, and they've just gotten lazy. And they're not interested in learning the new thing. They're more interested in whatever, their kids' baseball, which is all super important to have balance in life. But you've got to bring that intensity around being a learner, because that is what a software engineer is. It's a learner. It's someone who is in the business of learning new things constantly, because software changes constantly.
Great, thanks for sharing that perspective. Yeah, we've been thinking about this thesis also for AI. Totally agree with everything you said, and maybe it's an opportunity for those, if people are not keeping up currently in industry, people are really up to speed.
Huge opportunity.
Huge opportunity for,
Yeah.
for jobs. It might seem like it's further behind, but you can maybe grapple even further with it.
Well, I mean, what's going to happen is that people who would otherwise not be qualified to be software engineers in the not too distant future are going to be productive software engineers, because AI is such a powerful partner. And, you know, as you know, software engineering in some ways is like putting a puzzle together. You take this component, you take this component, you take this component, you connect them together, you run the process. Does it generate the outcome you want? Okay, great, now I can move on. And then you keep building from there. And with AI on your side, or literally as your co-pilot, not to borrow Microsoft's name, you can be much more productive at that. And so I would really encourage you guys to get really good at that. And there is nothing standing in your way to learn how to do that, because there's lots of tools out there that can teach you how to do that, whether it's, you know, YouTube videos or AI-assisted software programming courses. There's a lot of stuff out there, and I know that in talking to your team earlier, you guys are working on some agent work where you have an agent that will help you along the way. Those are awesome things, and I encourage you to just embrace them and lean into them.
Great, thanks so much, Adam.